Good afternoon, everybody. We're going to go ahead and get started this morning or this afternoon on the House Bill 20 Governor's recommendations and pick up where we left off. So, Dan, when you're ready, please join us and remind the folks at home who you are, and then remind me where we left off, and we'll go ahead and go. Thank you.
Okay, for the record, Dan Hogg, State Budget Director. We are, I think, on page 106. We finished the first section, which was the economic impact public health section. So we are now to page 106, which is the beginning of the infrastructure, which is broadband, water, and wastewater projects. So page 6 is wastewater treatment facilities at MoDOT sheds. You can see on page 107 the various MoDOT sheds. Basically, we are going to connect these sheds to city sewer, so they're no longer septic systems, and that's much more cost effective, and you have a lot less maintenance issues doing that. So this is $8.5 million. Page 111 is state fair improvements. This is $33.6 million. You can see on page 112 the breakdown of that. Most of that is for a new arena at the state fair, which would be a covered arena with seating for 3,000 to 5,000 spectators, the concessions, restrooms, etc. What I want to say about this is with an arena of this size, we can attract events that we cannot attract right now and make the state fairgrounds usable all year round for big events. The National High School Rodeo and other events like that have indicated that they would be interested in coming to Missouri, but we have to have the facilities that can support that type of event. I will also tell you, in the capital improvements bill that you'll see coming up, we also have an item in there for 600 new campsites, which will be in conjunction with this and allow us to really hold some good events, bring a lot of good economic activity to central Missouri.
Representative Nierenberg, you're recognized for an inquiry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Why are you laughing?
I figured you might have a question on this one.
Well, in fact, I do. So $29 million for the new stadium. Would you share with us as to what you would project that we'd be able to rent this stadium out for to private groups? Is that what you're saying with that intention, is being able to attract different groups?
Yeah, we would attract, like I said, the National High School Rodeo, some events like that.
Concerts, perhaps.
Yeah, concerts, things like that.
Yeah, so more monster truck shows, whatever it may be.
Yeah, more year-round activity at the state fairgrounds, and so I know that the economic impact for a big event like the National High School Rodeo Finals is like $13 million. Oh, I'm sorry, $16 million for the high school rodeos, $13 million for the National Junior High Rodeo. And then there's also large RV festivals that we think we would be able to attract with this, plus the additional the sites that I talked about. And those kind of events, we expect to have about a $15 million economic impact. So these are rather large economic impacts, especially for middle of the state, urban areas.
Sure.
We don't see a lot of those type of large economic impacts.
No, and I think it's great. I mean, and obviously with Sedalia being kind of centrally located in our state, and I voiced some concerns about this, not because I don't like the state fair. We were there. My kids love it. Kids Club Wrestling Tournament is held there. So I see a lot of advantages for having a nice arena. However, this is $29 million. And my question is essentially if there's a projection on how often this would be rented out and how much money the state could make from it. I understand the economic development that surrounds that with, restaurants and hotels and all of that other economic activity. But in terms of actual revenue for the state, if there's any projections, or if the state already has some property that is rented out to private groups, if there's anything comparable to what this would be.
I don't think there's anything comparable. There's small events at the state fair right now, you know, outside of the state fair, but nothing on this scope because we don't have the
And
the
no other state
infrastructure.
properties that,
I'd have to go back and look. I don't know if, you know, there may be some events at other state properties. I'd have to look. And I will see, I don't have with me, but I think I can probably get a projection on how often we think events
yeah,
would
I think that would be really
attractive.
helpful.
So,
And if we could break that down and see, yes, that we would be able to recap this money in a number of years, I think that's advantageous to be
Yeah,
able
and
to,
I think,
look at those
you know,
projections.
you got to look at it in two ways. One, recapping it directly back to the state, but also then the indirect benefits that go to that community and, you know, the state as a whole for bringing in these type of events. So,
Okay.
but yeah, we can look at that, and I'll see what we can develop and provide it to you and the committee.
Yeah, that'd be helpful. And then with that being said, as you are well aware with your decades of experience in this process,
Yeah,
obviously way
unfortunately.
longer than I've been around, my question was going to, I try not to use a lot of disparaging comments to people I need to work with, but there we go. But
I'm old, it's a fact. I mean, what can I do
you
about
know, in this process and how the budget works is that balancing rule. And so when I'm looking at other capital improvement projects that I see a lot of need for example, our Missouri schools for the severely disabled that haven't been touched in several decades, I'm looking at some of these one-time investments where we can really bring those schools up to par with some of our great school districts, including the special school districts. So
No, I understand.
with that being
and-
said, that's why I'm really concerned about these dollars and seeing where we can possibly look at other avenues if we have to balance within these ARPA funds.
I
So,
will say that as far as the state schools for the handicap and the other state schools out there, the blind and the deaf,
sure.
we are proposing putting additional money on above and beyond the constitutionally required transfer to our facilities maintenance and reserve fund, which is the fund that we can use to provide upgrades to those facilities. So some of those funds could be used for that too.
Okay,
So we
so
are,
I would love to explore that, and hopefully with the
so
chair
we
as
are
well,
asking for an additional 100 million. The constitutionally required transfer is around 90 million.
Okay,
So we are asking for, on top of that 90 million, an additional 100 million to go into that fund that can only be used for maintenance and upgrading of state facilities,
okay,
which those would qualify for.
okay, wonderful. Yep, I'd love to talk to you more
Sure.
about that. Appreciate it. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Representative Black, you're recognized for an inquiry.
Yeah, to inquire, but probably to speak also. How long, sir, have you been aware of the possibility of this arena that's listed on page 112?
Oh, I mean, I know it's,
Has it been 4 years? Have you
yeah,
known
it's
about it
certainly
that long?
several
4
years.
to
I
5?
mean, I know that sometime in that time frame, there was talk that, you know, the National High School Rodeo would like to come to Missouri, but we needed better facilities to attract them. And so at that point, we started looking into it. Obviously, a $30 million investment's a pretty difficult investment, a lot of budget years. But,
Especially at that time.
you know, but now we have the ARPA, and I think we're able to do a lot of good things with ARPA, including this.
Okay, and National Final Rodeo, the group that takes care of the National High School Final Rodeo, have they tried to work within the state of Missouri that you know about? And I don't know whether you know that answer or not, Dan. I do know the answer.
I
but-
think there have been some conversations. I don't know how far and how deep those, but I know in my world of budget, there certainly have been conversations about we'd like to do some things to the fairground to attract it, but I'm sure Director Chin has more information than I do.
Okay, let's don't fill everybody's time up with a bunch of stuff. I'm going to ask questions, and you answer. So, has the National High School Finals Rodeo Group looked at venues within Missouri, or at least Missouri-Kansas line, and in the last few years to try to move that event here?
Yes, they have, and we did put a bid in 2017, I believe, 2018 timeframe, but we lost that bid due to not having a competition-size rodeo arena.
Okay, has any place in Missouri/Kansas line, anybody knows what I'm talking about, have they been offered a contract and signed with National Finals Rodeo?
Yes, the Kansas did receive the contract that we bid on at that time period, but however, they do not have facilities that are built yet for that.
Okay, and at this point, more than likely, those facilities aren't going to be built, right?
Correct.
We're probably not going to be able fast enough with this facility to take over for the American Royal, but the American Royal facility move, I don't know, I guess we can say that on microphone, right? Isn't happening very well. Okay, another question. You help take care of the state fair, and your staff works with the state fair. When we look down these other list of items on page 112, are those surprises, even though they're not 29 million? Were those surprises of things that have needed to be fixed? The stormwater system repair, separating the sanitary water, stormwater system study, and wastewater collection system. Those things are things that I've known about that have been a problem before I ever sat in this position, and this is an opportunity to fix that. Some of these things need to be fixed so we can build new bathrooms that I want where?
At the swine barn.
Okay, that's good. And ultimately, are those new bathrooms being paid for by state tax dollars?
No, not the ones that are proposed at the State Fair swine building. The State Fair Foundation has committed
Good. You got the next answer. So what other organization does the State Fair Commission and the director work for to help fund items at the State Fair?
The State Fair Foundation also works to raise money for capital improvements at the Missouri State Fairgrounds.
Okay, last question. Of these items and improvements we're looking with Missouri State Fair, and also I'm going to throw this in if you want to add some commentary to it, you're certainly welcome to. Also, the State Fair Community College partnership that is going on with other things around the State Fair. What agreement with what kind of destination organization have entered in a partnership with the Missouri State Fair Foundation and Missouri State Fair Commission to help develop these plans and improve this as a venue for our state? What's the name of that group?
With the State Fair Community College?
No,
The
but
Missouri
State Fair Community College is part of the discussion, but what group have we entered in? I shouldn't say we, but has Missouri State Fair and Missouri State Fair Foundation entered into to help develop a plan to make sure that somebody like Representative Nuremberg knows that this isn't just an old hick from Livingston County coming up with these ideas?
PGVA, I believe, is the name of the consulting
And what kind of
firm.
things do you know of that they've helped develop in our country?
They are working on museums around the country, as well as theme parks and historical museum-type events as well, to attract tourism to cities, large cities. SeaWorld, I believe they've worked for SeaWorld, Branson, Silver Dollar City area, as well as St. Louis, too.
Unfortunately, I remembered one more question. Is this dollar amount the end of the investment that is expected to happen at the fairgrounds?
No, this is just the beginning. The Missouri State Fair Foundation would like to continue to fundraise to improve upon this facility. One day, a dream with other agricultural organizations is to have an ag education learning center on the state fairgrounds that could be used year-round as well.
Thank you, Director.
Representative Roberts, you're recognized for inquiry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I heard some discussion about RV. Have you talked with a specific organization about that?
I don't think a specific organization. However, we have held RV rallies in the past, and those people who have participated in that have said that they've been parts of larger RV rallies. If we had more campsites available, we could attract those type of events as well.
Okay, I just want to, this is kind of a comment, but also maybe a caution. I have some experience with large RV events. When you're talking 3,000 or 4,000 RVs, the economic impact is huge, but more than that, they travel on our roads, and so the impact of the state is much greater than just the area where that event might be held. But you're talking about a huge event. 4,000 RVs can lock up your highway system. So if you're talking with anybody in particular, I'd sure like to hear about that because I do know some of them.
Okay.
Appreciate it.
Thank you for that.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
All right. Representative Meredith, you're recognized for inquiry.
Thank you. Sorry, I think this might have been asked, but I didn't hear the answer. Did you say that if there would be a local match to this project? Like, are there any other groups that would be paying for this, or would it be entirely funded, the arena specifically, entirely funded by these state/federal dollars?
So what's proposed in the budget is just for the ARPA dollars. However, the Missouri State Fair Foundation is helping to raise money for capital fair improvements at the fairgrounds. And when we get the results of this PGVA recommendation, we will be making additional improvements to the state fairgrounds. And that's where the Missouri State Fair Foundation comes into play in raising the money for that to help with those improvements.
Okay, but for the arena specifically?
For the arena, it's just the ARPA dollars right now.
That's all. So the 29.3 million estimate is the full cost of the arena specifically, and you're suggesting we pay that fully with ARPA dollars?
Yes, ARPA dollars. However, the State Fairgrounds is a staging center for emergencies in that local area. So this location would also be used for emergency if we had a tornado or other devastating disaster that might happen to that area. The Red Cross always comes and uses the State Fairgrounds, and this would be a really nice, large area that would help provide temporary housing, shelter, whatever they might need in the event of a natural disaster.
Gotcha. And then it would be fully state-owned and operated?
Correct.
No indication of that ever changing?
No.
Okay, thanks.
Can I add one thing, Representative Meredith? I'd spoken that in House Bill, I don't even remember the number, the CI bill, in conjunction with this, we are proposing 600 additional campsites. On that project, the State Fair Foundation is contributing $1 million of that project. The state's committing $1 million. And then State Fair Community College wants part of the land that we would be buying for those campsites. They're doing $2 million to that land purchase. So there is some non-state money, not necessarily in this budget item, but in the overall plan for the State Fair. We have the State Fair Foundation is contributing $1 million to those additional.
And how much were we
campgrounds.
being asked to do for that?
$1 million.
I'm sorry?
$1 million.
$1 million. Okay,
Yep.
so 1 million, and then there's 4 million from other groups.
$3 million from other. $1 million from the
and two,
state.
I thought?
$1 million from State Fair Foundation, and Chris is going to check me on my numbers here.
Gotcha.
And then $2 million from State Fair Community Colleges Foundation, because they want part of the land for the State Fair Community College, which is right there.
I only ask, a lot of the things in here have
Yes.
local match as an important feature. Obviously, the economic benefit for the state is big for this potentially, but for that area, it would be enormous, I imagine. So it does make me wonder if we should be expecting
This is a
some kind
little
of match
different
there as
because
well.
this is a fully state facility that we're improving versus, with water, those are municipal facilities that we're improving, or, other, law enforcement grants. We're giving the money to local law enforcement. So this is a little different in that way because it is a fully owned state facility. But again, the State Fair Foundation is contributing to the overall project, not in this bill.
Okay, and would that be comparable to some of the facilities we have at state colleges and universities? Are those state-owned? I mean, they're owned by the colleges, right?
They're sort of, I would say those are not state-owned.
Are there other examples of facilities like this in the state that the state owns?
I mean, state parks, I think, would probably be the best example.
No kind of venue?
There may be some venues at some of the state parks, I don't know, but I don't know of another venue. I can look into it, Representative, but off
So
the
this
top of my
might be the
head,
first of its kind for the state.
I think so, yeah.
Okay. And then where did the 29 million come from? Was that PJV?
Where that estimate came from?
We worked with facility and maintenance
Oh.
on the design. We went off of what the national competition rodeo size was for an arena, but also that would have dual purposes. So it wouldn't be just for a rodeo, but it could be used for other events as well.
Okay, thanks.
All right, Director, we'll move on.
All right, that will take us to page 115, which is broadband and Wi-Fi for state parks. This is $9.6 million to expand Wi-Fi at our state parks. That's one of the amenities that campers are now expecting when they go to state parks, and so we want to upgrade and, in some places, add it to our state parks.
Representative Burnett, you're recognized for inquiry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So is this part of the $400 million investment in broadband?
Yes, this would be considered part of
this
our
fits in
broadband
that plan.
investment, yes.
Okay. And are we looking at developing some apps for the guests to use to access?
Yeah, I'm sure we are.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Representative Shields, you're recognized for an inquiry.
Thank you. I normally don't like just to make comments, but I will say as people travel across the United States, they actually look for this amenity when they come to the state parks, and I think this is a great investment for our state.
Representative Riggs, you are recognized for an inquiry.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Could you walk us through briefly, and this is probably a question somebody else will have to jump up. It's not just state parks we're talking about getting broadband out. It's conservation areas. There are separate funds that we'll get into to basically erect towers. What is the master plan for deploying this out in these various state-owned areas?
Yeah, I mean, this item specifically is just state parks, but you're right, there are other items in here throughout this bill that are other broadband items, including, erecting towers on state land to get broadband to those towers, to erect towers on state land to be able to provide the 5G in areas that it's not served now. I don't know if broadband, here's DED can come probably give you a better idea on the overall plan.
And conservation as well. So, I mean, everybody's supposed to be in this,
Yeah.
whatever, so it's not just state parks.
No.
Maggie Coast, Acting Director for Missouri Department of Economic Development. So we have been coordinating across agencies to build a plan that we feel is fairly comprehensive for the state. You're going to see some other items here as well. We're going to talk about the infrastructure grant. We've talked about cell towers previously. We're going to be talking about affordability. So there is a larger plan in place here where we're looking at the different areas because we know that broadband is a multifaceted challenge for our state and want to make sure that we're addressing it from multiple angles.
Yeah, and just to follow that up, is there, I'm sure it's in the process of being developed, and once there is a map available where we're actually going to position these, if we could get at that to see exactly geographically what we're talking about, that would be a big help.
Yeah, absolutely. Mapping is a piece that we're looking to fund through some of the capacity building. It's also, we're looking at a gap analysis right now that we're working on. So we're going to do that, and that will certainly guide our efforts as we look to fund projects across the state. That is, again, we're talking specifically here about state parks, but the larger effort as a whole will definitely be
And
guided by
that's part of the
that
problem.
data.
We talk about silo things here. I wanted to have the bigger picture discussion. What are we actually doing as a state? You know, checking off these various boxes. It's not just DNR, it's not just conservation. Other folks are in this as well. So I want everybody to be aware of that. Yep. Thank you.
And the mapping specifically, you'll see on the item on page 137 when we get there. So we've got it in various places. So,
Representative Mayhew, you're recognized for an inquiry.
Probably a DNR question, but is there a list of projects that go into this $9 million?
yeah, we can get that for you.
Yeah, that Roaring River, you can't even make a cell phone call out of there, so I'd sure like to see that one.
Yeah,
done.
we'll get you a list of the
Okay.
specific projects.
Yeah.
Just distribute it to them so we don't.
Yes. Okay, thank you. Thank
Yeah,
you,
we'll
Mr.
just
Chair.
distribute it to the whole committee.
All right, we can move forward. Thanks.
Okay, that takes us to page 118, which is water infrastructure and lead service lines. This is $411 million. I will point out that this includes $100 million of the budget stabilization fund, not just ARPA. As I told you when we discussed this last time, there's 4 or 5 items in here that we've supplemented with a little additional money on top of the ARPA funding. This is drinking water, wastewater, stormwater infrastructure projects in Missouri that are very underfunded. We've identified over $3 billion in projects. This is a matching program. Again, these are municipal, county, other entities, facilities. And then it also has the sort of the lead line service mapping, so that when we get the infrastructure dollars from the federal government that actually has the money for lead line replacement, we know where those lead lines are and can get that moving quickly.
Representative Burnett, you're recognized for an inquiry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So this, is this the same item that was in the emergency supplemental?
Yes, that was a scaled down version of this, what we thought we could do through the end of this fiscal year. I will tell you, I know this committee took that out, and based on some of the timing and those kind of things, I think we can, we don't need it in the supplemental. What we needed was the people to get the program up and running, which this committee left in and the Senate left in their committee. So I think we're in a good spot on this, but yes, this is those dollars.
And can you compare that to the request then that was in the emergency supplemental? How is that different?
The request in the emergency supplemental, like I said, when we put that together, we weren't really sure on the timing of how quickly we would be able to spend some of this money. And as I said, the most important thing in the emergency supplemental was the people to get the program up and running. Those continue to be in the emergency supplemental, and so that's the most important thing for us. So I think we are very comfortable what's in the emergency supplemental that will help us be ready for July 1st when these dollars are available to be spent.
Okay, and do you know, have we done an inventory of the lead lines, or does this include?
This includes the $10 million for the lead service lines inventory.
Okay, so, but we're not aware of any other inventory or mapping that has been done?
I think there's some, but I'm not sure it's as comprehensive as we would like it to be. And like I said, we know that there's going to be significant dollars from the federal government for this coming in the infrastructure bill, which has already passed. We haven't gotten much information on it yet, but we want to be prepared when those dollars come down to know where to deploy those dollars.
And that's what this is.
That's what this will help on the lead line inventory.
Okay, this isn't going to replace the
This
lead
isn't the
lines.
replacement. That'll be the infrastructure dollars that are
This just
coming
lets us
down.
know where the replacement needs to
Yes.
take place.
Yes.
And where the priorities are.
Yeah, I think yes.
Okay, all right. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Representative Mayhew, you're recognized for inquiry, and then we have Representative Wyndham and Lewis following.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Okay, so $10 million on an inventory, is that what we're looking at? Is this just a placeholder number, or do we have a hard and fast kind of an estimate on that issue? We got DNR coming up here.
Good morning. I'm Hannah Humphrey. I'm one of the deputy directors at Department of Natural Resources. The $10 million is an amount that we are planning to offer as grants to communities to conduct the lead service line inventories for their own systems. And the amount is based on the fact that these lead service line inventories aren't, because they're just a study and they generally involve record reviews, maybe a little testing, they're not incredibly expensive. And so we think that we can help these communities get a lot further along in their required lead service line inventories with this amount.
Okay, so we don't know how many grants will be applied for, so sort of like a placeholder number.
Right.
I still have a little bit of heartburn with that amount of money we're putting in the stormwater, because, I mean, let's face it, the MS4s all got a direct ARPA funds. You know, those folks did. My guess is that a lot of this water and wastewater infrastructure stuff is in the smaller and rural communities, smaller counties, et cetera. So do you guys have some kind of picture on why you picked $150 million on the stormwater? Can you share that with us? Not now, of course, but offline.
Sure, we can. And essentially, the reason that we were recommending some stormwater money in addition to the drinking water and wastewater money is because, as you stated, the small rural communities tend to be those that really struggle with funding their drinking water and wastewater. The larger communities do also struggle. The MS4s in the large urban centers are struggling to afford stormwater infrastructure. They generally have very small, if any, amounts of dedicated funding. It tends to be viewed as an unfunded mandate.
No, I get all that, but they got a direct ARPA funds.
My understanding is that the local leaders in those cities, I know neither Kansas City nor MSD in St. Louis have designated any of the ARPA funding that those communities have received directly to the utilities for their use for wastewater, drinking water, or stormwater. So I think a lot of local municipalities are looking at this more to fill other needs and not any not necessarily water and wastewater. I think that tends to be something that's happening more in the small communities based on those that I've talked to.
So do I have a misunderstanding that the larger cities did not get a direct ARPA payment?
They did get a direct ARPA payment. They're not using it for water infrastructure, though. So, for example, in the city of Kansas City, the KC Water is the utility for water infrastructure. And in my last conversation with folks at KC Water, the city leaders were not putting any of the local ARPA dollars toward those water needs.
Fascinating.
And same in St. Louis, City
But
and County.
but you've got a list or a way you came up with these numbers, something like that.
Yes, and it relates to that request for information.
Okay. Yeah. Please share that with me. Thank
Sure,
you.
will
Thank you,
do.
Mr. Chair.
Representative Wyndham, you're recognized for an inquiry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So my question was about how much money it would take to replace just the lead pipelines. I'm guessing we don't fully know that. Because
Right. We won't have that number until all the lead service line inventories have been completed by the drinking water utilities. And they have several years to get that work done. It's required under a new federal rule, the lead and copper rule. So they've got a few years to get those inventories done. And then once those inventories have been done, then I think we'll have a lot better picture of what that replacement number looks like.
So do we not start working until the inventories are done?
Anytime, there are several cities that I know already have lead replacement programs. There's a few cities that have already done inventories, and they are, replacing lines if needed. So they're required to start replacing lead service lines if their lead monitoring indicates that their results or concentrations in the water that's being served is high in lead. If they don't have those lead detects in the water, then they won't be required to replace the lead service lines. It'll be their option to replace them.
How often tell me a little bit more about the lead monitoring program.
It's brand new. The rule was just passed by the Environmental Protection Agency in the last 4 months.
Okay.
And so our Department of Natural Resources regulatory program is going to need to initiate rulemaking to actually implement it in Missouri.
So the program that you were just talking about, right, where they wouldn't have to replace it unless the rates are high, that program isn't even in place yet.
Right.
Okay, and then so are cities required to do an inventory before they're able to apply for this grant?
No, because these grants are specifically to help them conduct that inventory. So it'll be money to hire the engineers to prepare that inventory for them. So then they're ready.
Not necessarily the inventory, but if they're not able to do the inventory, but they know they have lead lines, then can they forego the inventory and still get the upcoming money for replacing the lines?
We don't know yet because the guidance for the bipartisan infrastructure law money is not out yet.
Okay. So what I'm worried about is the older communities of 400, 500 folks that aren't going to be able to match and get these potential funds to replace their lead lines. So what then?
So the way that we're going to be proposing to structure this with ARPA is that we'd like to see them provide local match, especially with their local ARPA funds. But those that we can't reach with this funding, I do anticipate that once the guidance from the Environmental Protection Agency is out for the bipartisan infrastructure law, that we are going to be looking at what kinds of other programs, especially grants, that we can structure and set up to help. And, that could be all of the ARPA programs are emphasizing local match. That's not going to be something that we're going to be looking at. We're going to be looking more at need with the bipartisan infrastructure law money.
So will those communities then be behind because they had to wait for the bipartisan infrastructure law rather than using this money that we're appropriating now?
They may be behind. They may be behind.
So what can we do to make them not be behind and help them tap into this money? Where's the 50%? Where's the match coming from? Is that us saying that?
We actually, the match, as what we're proposing is that the match be a scoring factor and not a requirement. So those who are offering some match at, from 5 to 10 to 15 to 20%, that they get points in their scoring for that. Conceivably, there could be communities that, because some of the other scoring factors they score really high with, like poverty rate, their median household income, they could score so high there that could override the fact that they don't have local match.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. Oh, can you send us that scoring guide?
Sure. Yes, absolutely. We'll follow up with you.
Thank you.
Representative Lewis, you're recognized for an inquiry.
Yeah, hopefully this is quick for you. So in the grant process, is it going to be then done by you in-house? Well, not you personally, DED?
I'm with Department of Natural Resources,
Okay.
and so this portion of the money, the item that we're on now, will be through Department of Natural Resources, and it will be overseen by a group that we have called the Financial Assistance Center, who are already managing our state revolving funds for drinking water and wastewater. One of the things that you'll see is that we're requesting a little funding to staff up, but these are staff that are very have a lot of expertise in this area, and they're going to be able to stand these programs up very quickly and administer them efficiently, we believe.
So these grants for this $250 million, $150 million for wastewater, drinking water, stormwater infrastructure, those are going to be going out to the municipalities that fill out a grant application through DNR with the scoring guide that you've just talked about. If they have a matching fund, that's going to boost them up the scoring guide.
Right.
And then this is the way that they would end up drawing these dollars down to repair things, not necessarily the lead. We're not talking about necessarily lead, just
Right.
talking about infrastructure needs of all kinds.
Right.
But, the lead one's a little different issue, I know. All that's correct, right?
Yes,
And that's through
absolutely.
the DNR?
Right.
Okay. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
And that July 1st?
It depends on when we receive the funding appropriation. We conceivably, we really want to be ready by April so that we're ready to have it ready to roll out as soon as there's an appropriation, because there, is obviously a time challenge here.
The additional people they are requesting is in the emergency supplemental. So when we get that passed and signed, hopefully very quickly here soon, they can start hiring those people and staffing up so that by the time the money's available to be sent out July 1st, they can already have developed the scoring metrics, get the grant applications, formats ready, and all that stuff.
So the grant applications could actually come in between April and July 1st? Or, that's assuming that.
I mean, there's going to be a little time to get the people hired and all that, but it's
before-
close to July. Yeah,
So we would actually fill out applications if we were a municipality. A municipality would try to fill those, make that grant application before July 1st.
Possibly, yes.
Okay, that's what I wanted. Thank you, appreciate it.
Representative Ritchie, you're recognized for an inquiry.
Thank you. Just real quick, on the wastewater, drinking water, the $250 million pot, what kind of interest have you seen thus far in terms of municipalities reaching out with project interests?
I think all of you have received this booklet, and what this booklet indicates is that communities with projects, and these are specific, very specific projects and not just kind of wish list items, are proposing that they would apply for up to $3 billion. So there's tremendous interest, and we have no doubt that we will, when we open the application process, that we'll be able to fully allocate all of the funds.
Okay. Yeah, because I know that, my office has been inundated with a lot of interest in this area as well as many
Right.
others. And there's one municipality in particular, they have checked off every box. They have done a phenomenal job in terms of managing their project, matching funds, everything. But the size of the need is a good portion of this. And so we've been communicating, listen, this $250 million is going to spend very quickly when you're looking statewide at all of the different political subdivisions needing this help. And $100 million, though they've done everything that would have been asked of them with excellence, is just going to be really tough for them to be able to pull for the totality of their needs. So the scoring mechanism being what it is, an entity that would check off every box, because I would imagine you have probably been in conversation with them. They're going to score very high. So at that point, how are you anticipating measuring the limitation of the funds in terms of reducing the available dollars for a request when every box is checked off?
So they'll check the boxes, but there'll also be assigned points for the boxes, and there'll be kind of a range. And what we are talking internally about right now is potentially a cap for the amount of grant that we would award for projects in order to maximize the amount of communities that we're able to help. And I think, that's something that we'll probably be ready to talk about within the next month or two. We've got our financial analysts looking at all the communities that responded to our request for information to do some of that analysis. One of the things that we have suggested to some of the communities we've talked with is if they could break off part of their project as a phase one, maybe, that might be a way for us, because one of the concerns we'd have is, if we're only going to be able to fund part of it, are they still going to be able to get it done? So that is something that we recommend every day to these communities, is that they try to see if they can divide up their project a little bit and break off a smaller portion.
Sure. Is there a safe range that you can identify at this point of what the cap could potentially fall within?
Probably not today. I think, but I do think in the next month or two we'll be able to talk about that.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Representative John Black, you're recognized for an inquiry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As the representative suggested, this is a oversubscribed fund. And my question, everything on this list, of course, is these pages we're looking at are needs that are undoubted. Can you tell me how this was put together to determine what the allocation would be on the lines between page 106 and 156? What was the process where we came up with $411 million instead of $811 million for this particular line?
Well, $2.8 billion is a lot of money. There's a lot of needs out there too, and so it's a finite amount. And so at some point, we sat down with the cabinet, the governor's office, and others, and just tried to look at where we can try to meet the most overall needs for the state. There's needs in broadband, there's needs in water, there's needs in, healthcare, there's needs all over the place. And so we did our best to try to take into account all those needs and look at it globally, and these are the amounts we came up with.
Thank you.
And to build on what Dan said, I will also add that we are looking forward to this bipartisan infrastructure law that's passed, that we're estimating, without having heard yet what our allocations are, our estimates for our allocations are that Missouri will receive over about 5 years, $1.4 billion in additional federal funding through our state revolving fund programs that fund wastewater, drinking water, and stormwater infrastructure. And that funding is low interest loans with also grants. And so what I think, our strategy at the department is those that we can't fund with the ARPA program that have applied, then we're going to be reaching out to them to try to get them in our SRF programs to try to help them that way.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I think we're ready to move on.
Okay, so that takes us to page 122, which is state park water and wastewater infrastructure projects. There are proposed in this are 19 drinking water projects, which would do things like replace existing water lines, connecting the water systems to public water supply, replacement of well houses, installation of water towers. Additionally, includes 26 wastewater projects, which would be repairing, replacing, or rebuilding lagoons and sewer systems, replacements of sewage, lift stations, septic tanks, and sewer lines, and where possible, connecting to public sewer systems. So a total of 45 projects throughout our state parks. And we'll provide a list of those specific projects to the committee. Page 125 is the Missouri Hydrology Information Center. This is $10.4 million. This is a hydrology information system. We're using the Iowa Hydrology Flood Center as a guide. This will help us increase our ability to predict floods, also increase our ability to identify water resources during a drought. Okay, page 128.
Do you have a question? Representative Mayhew, you're recognized for inquiry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Number one, right off the bat, the Iowa Flood Center, I'd like for somebody to come talk to me about that. I have some specific complaints if we're using that for the model. Basically, they've got two guys, and if you make a request to them, it's not online, or it wasn't a year and a half ago, and the information's not online, you got to rely on somebody right off the bat. But I'd love somebody to come by and talk to me about that. On the LIDAR component of this, and once again, probably not a question can be answered today, is this fill in on what we've already got, or is this brand new LIDAR for the entire state? And I want to make sure that folks are aware that there's already some ARPA funds that are going for the 911 mapping. So this aerial photography, I hope we're not planning on doing the same project twice. So get back with me on that. On this FTE, is this existing folks, do we know, or are these four new hires that we're going to have to sustain on into the future? That's probably a question we can answer today.
Yeah,
Somebody's got them.
These would be 4 new hires, is my understanding.
Okay, so we're looking at probably some general revenue moving on into the future.
A little bit, yeah.
Yeah.
Look, there's,
Mike, did you have a comment on that? Okay.
Glad to hear that.
Let him take it, yeah.
Okay, so on those other questions, if somebody will get back with me, I'd appreciate it. So these are going to be 4 new people. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, we'll have the department come see you.
Okay.
Okay, so page 128 is stormwater and flooding repairs at a couple of various state facilities. For the Conservation Commission, the George O. White State Forest Nursery stormwater improvements and stream renovation there, and then the Little River Conservation Area road replacement, which has been, because of flooding, the road has been washed out and is not really suitable right now. This also includes a 50% Conservation Commission funding. So it's 1.5 million ARPA, 1.5 million Conservation Commission fund. Page 131 is the Columbia Bottoms levee setback. This will set back a levee in the Columbia Bottoms Conservation Area. This project will reconnect the rivers with the historic floodplain, provide 3,000 acres of forested wetland for additional flood storage, and this is going to directly benefit private and public landowners. We'll also relocate the damaged main road away from flood hazards and add flood resiliency to keep the river access. This also is $12 million of Conservation Commission fund, so $15 million ARPA, $12 million Conservation Commission fund on this project. Page 134 is $250 million for broadband infrastructure. This funding will expand broadband availability of speeds of at least 100 Mbps / 20 Mbps to Missouri households through deployment of last and middle mile broadband infrastructure. This program could leverage an additional $75 to $100 million in new private investment in broadband providers in totality throughout the state.
Representative Deaton, you're recognized for the inquiry.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I'm going to have to step out. And so, unfortunately for me, fortunately for everyone else, I'm probably not going to get to spend as much time on this as I'd like. But are there plans in place? I know we've done this on a very, very small scale or something kind of like this, maybe not exactly like the department's envisioning this would be done. But are the as it relates to any grant awards that would be made, the conditions, the terms, it's got to be some documentation that either exists or will exist. And my question is, does that now exist or is it still being developed?
Short answer, yes. Both it will reflect what providers have seen before, as well as it's also still being developed. So what we are expecting to do is take what we have done through the Broadband Grant Program and through CARES Act funding, where we've had competitive grants where we've allocated funding to help bring broadband infrastructure to other areas, and draw that to ARPA standards. So we're taking what we have done in ARPA standards, putting those together, and draft guidelines will be produced in April. So we're working with outside individuals who are smart in this world to help us draw those together to make sure none of the providers or the communities are caught off guard by what they will see, but that they kind of know what to expect. So yes, we're going to work off what you've seen before, but also are looking to draw those to ARPA standards to be able to make sure we're working together in this process.
What you've done to date, what has the award period been on those?
Meaning the time from award to completion of project?
Yes.
Or
as well, let me be more specific. As in, they receive the dollars.
It's a reimbursement
to complete.
It's a reimbursement as costs have been experienced by the provider community.
Okay, so then the correct question would be.
Sorry.
No, that's helpful. The correct question that I need to ask to get at what I'm wanting to get at would be, how long do they have to incur that expenditure to seek reimbursement under the grant award?
Yes, through ARPA, all funds have to be spent by 2026.
Well, I know that.
Yes,
but
sorry.
I'm
not familiar with former programs. I'm sorry.
Okay.
So again, Maggie Coast, Acting Director for the Department of Economic Development. In the past, whenever we've had the state appropriation for our infrastructure program, they've had from the beginning of the fiscal year to apply or for us to get that program going, and then they have to have those funds incurred by the end of the fiscal year. So one fiscal year for each grant cycle that we've done.
That's what I thought. That was my impression, my understanding.
But I think that's sort of a function of how the appropriation works. On this one, I think we envision it a little bit different because as we talked at the beginning, the last hearing, what we envision here is we will appropriate this money, and then in the 24 budget, we'll appropriate what's not spent. So in a normal appropriation, especially a GR appropriation like they've had for broadband, you sort of, at the end of the year, that appropriation is no longer valid, and if you don't spend it, you don't have that money. This one will not be that way. This money will be set aside, and again, we'll have until the end of 2026 to get that money out of the state coffers to individuals. So this could be a longer period, and especially since it's a much bigger program. We had $5-6 million in the program previously, which is a lot easier to spend in one fiscal year versus $250 million.
I think that's probably right. If we were to do something like this, we'd see a lot of reappropriations. But I suspect, and maybe you don't know yet, but what sort of a timeline are you looking to put as it relates to the award, as far as timeline, dates, the term of the award?
Yep, I would say we plan on spending this down over the entirety of the allowable time. So
Not my
through
question. So,
2026.
sorry, I want to respect your time, but so I'm a provider.
Mhm.
I, apply, it's well taken, and how long do I have to incur that expenditure to seek reimbursement? Inside that upcoming fiscal year, the fiscal year for which the award was made, for multiple fiscal years, however long it takes to the end of what are you envisioning in that regard?
I think what we envision is for this to be multiple fiscal years for each project. So they would apply for us up front, and then we would be making a commitment over that time. And that's a part of why we've structured the appropriation this way, so that it would be a reappropriation, I think is the term, over multiple years. And a lot of that is because of the feedback that we've gotten on the existing program. Broadband providers, in order to do large projects and in order to truly put a dent in the problem that's out there, we need to be able to plan over multiple years and not just sort of in the state's fiscal year appropriation cycle.
Yeah, well, and I've heard from providers, and this is even months ago, and I assume it's only gotten worse. Maybe it's gotten better. Hopefully it has. But I've heard supply chain disruptions getting worse, not better. So I suspect that's not the case. But, they were telling me then they had to tell and make commitments for what they needed a year from today, now, if they wanted to get it, which would not compute with okay, we're going to make an award and it's got to be expended and you seek reimbursement within a given fiscal year. That just wouldn't be workable if that is true and is the case. And I think it probably is. And I suspect it's only going to be more true because, as I understand it, we're not the only ones looking to do broadband. So I assume there's a finite amount of resources. What can you tell me anything? And again, I think you all are department's very excited about this, so I don't want to insinuate that. But you're not the federal Congress. This kind of has been dropped on you, so you're doing the very best you can. I understand that. I want to make that clear. Having said that, it is a bit frustrating when I see $250 million and then strategies to achieve the performance measurement targets is that they're under development. I mean, we have virtually, and it's good we have an opportunity to ask questions, but we have virtually no information as it relates to this. When can we expect to see those sorts of measurements and things?
Yeah, again, April 1st is when we plan to have our guidelines published, and we can share some of the details that we've developed since the budget book has been published. I'm happy to sit down with you and go through those. We want to make sure that there's a process for stakeholders, for applicants to weigh in on our guidelines so that there's public input on that. That's part of the reason why we wanted to wait until this was out publicly to do that and make sure that come April 1 that we've got some good solid guidelines out there.
So broadband, the definition is now speeds of 100 down, 20 up. That's what we're going off of. There are multiple ways to get there, theoretically, even now with existing technologies, right?
Yes.
We seem, though, and correct me if I'm wrong, there seems to be a preference by the department, maybe by everyone, or a majority, maybe not, I don't know, but certainly there seems to be a preference, as I've understood it, as it relates to broadband, that this be delivered via fiber optic cable. Do you agree with that?
The department has always been provider neutral in all the grant programs that we've done in the past. ARPA guidelines are preferential towards fiber optic deployment. That's absolutely true.
Okay, in what way?
Because of the speed levels of looking to serve 100 by 100 symmetrical service, that's the standard.
But you're suggesting that's
more.
Well, that's not fiber's not the only technology that can produce that, is it?
From my understanding, it's one of the only, if not the only, that can provide that level of upload speed.
Okay. So,
with the director added, reliably without latency issues dependent on the number of users that are subscribing to the system.
Right. Yeah. Are there ARPA standards as it relates to latency?
Yes.
There are?
Yeah.
Okay. Interesting. I'm curious, and we talked a little bit about this offline a few weeks ago. Are you aware of any other states looking to do something? Because these are grants to providers. These would be grants to providers, but something more on the side of the individual where, because even if you have multiple providers and say representing multiple different technologies, they apply to you, well, you're going to choose what you assume to be the best option. But me as an individual, I'm never involved in that choice. Whereas if I had the ability to say, hey, anybody willing to come and perform, if they can get it to me, then I can direct some dollars to that provider who's willing and able to get broadband to me.
I'm not familiar, and I'm not sure that that would meet the ARPA guidelines, and it would be difficult for us to do that on a scorable, scalable basis of trying to get multiple.
Well, I mean, how would it not? If we put guidelines or standards in place that it had to be 100 down, 20 up, it had to meet all these things, and if it did, then, I mean, why in theory could you not? I mean, maybe it would be difficult or hard, but, I mean, it seems to me that something like that could be done.
I guess in theory it could.
Okay.
But I'm not sure that, I'm not, the question of am I familiar with any other state doing anything like that? No.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that, and and I'm not either.
Yeah.
To this to date, I was curious if you were, because that does interest me. I do think, and look, and to be clear for the gentleman from St. Louis City, there's so many things, and most of it the other night we've gone through in this book that I've got problems with, and but I didn't say anything. But just because I didn't say anything, there's a lot of things we're talking about these days that traditionally haven't been the role of government. And I'm not talking about this item specifically, but just throughout this book. But it does seem to me when we work directly with individuals, even as government, programs are more efficient. And I think back to recently during the pandemic, it was actually the Trump administration, and I'm not sure it was such a great program. They gave food, not means tested, and just out, and you had a lot of spoiled milk and all things. If you want to give food, I think EBT food stamps is a much more efficient and better way to do that. And I think you've seen that now, versus just indiscriminately putting it out there. And so I'm not so sure that wouldn't be the case, and this is more of a statement at this point in this regard too. And I'm not sure if it can be done, but it's something I'm interested in looking at. And with that, I've got more questions, but I'll save them for a later time. I know the committee has a lot of questions too. So thank you, Mr. Chairman, for your indulgence, and thank you for your responses today.
Thank you.
Representative Riggs, you're recognized for an inquiry.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Since you're here, and let's have a little more in-depth talk. So I'm going to go back here a little history lesson. The feds have been throwing billions at first 10-1 technology, then 25-3 technology, which we zoomed right on past. We understand with the Internet of Things, people are going to have 20, I think the record so far is 27 devices in their homes. So just spoiler alert, I've got legislation pending now that would jack it up to 100, which is where the feds are going to go, because we know when they say recommend one day, they require it the next, and that's the direction these things are headed. That would have a carve-out for the 120, what have you. There'll be people out there who can't make 25-3. So we have to, basically, we're going to talk universal access. We have to get them all out there. So personally, I'm technology agnostic, but I'm not speed agnostic, because we know which way this is going to go. So instead of playing catch-up to the feds, it would be nice to get ahead of the feds for a change. So having said that, the numbers, when we move them, when the feds do the goalpost, 25-3 now, 400,000-ish. I'm reading stuff up to 1 million Missourians at 100 would not be able to have that. And we talked about the latency, the importance of upload, download speeds. Now, upload is getting as important as anything else, because work from home, work from anywhere. It's not going to go away. We know that. So, and appreciate the guidelines coming forward, but just wanted to make sure that everybody understood that this is the direction that this state is headed, this country is headed, is to improve the speeds, knock this latency out. Yes, fiber can deliver that every day of the week with minimal interruptions. Other forms just aren't there yet. Until such time as they are, then fiber obviously is the safer bet of them all, and that's where most of these providers have gone. Having said that, there are other providers who haven't, and we're trying to be cognizant of them as well, so I'm sorry to filibuster this thing, but there are technologies out there that are in beta right now. They exist in low Earth orbit. I know there are folks out there in the federal level who are dealing with that. So is that something that the state has looked at as far as reliability, dependability? What issues do we have with latency at the statewide level, and how do we propose to solve those problems?
Yes, we are aware and following all technology advances as much as possible. There's a lot of options on the table, but the truth is we have to go off of what we know, especially when we're investing in infrastructure investment and knowing that there will be something left behind when it's done. From my understanding from multiple conversations with providers, fiber provides that. It's future-proof and can bring speeds. To your point about upload being important, I heard it said the other day, downloads for entertainment and upload is for economic development. I think that's a really important point to make when we're making this investment, that we have to make sure we're doing something that not only serves the needs for now, but also going forward. And what we know right now is fiber does that. And I think as you see some of these other things being tested, they may be very well and very productive and great options for people that need them. But as long as an investment's going, we have to draw these to ARPA standards, and we have to make sure we're doing it in as much of a future-proof way as possible.
All right, and previous question as far as timelines. In 2020, HB 1768 on my wall, we put a little something in there, basically a 3-year window. If you get the state funds, deploy within 3 years, or give the money back. That is still good law, correct?
Yes, I agree. And I thought it was a great point when we're talking about timelines, especially with these ARPA-funded projects. 2026 is the timeline we know about, but it's also important for us to keep in mind when we're worrying about timelines is the supply chain issues and employment that we're going to have for these projects, for these people executing the projects. We're going to have to understand that these things are going to take time to develop, especially larger scale projects.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Representative Ritchie, you are recognized for the inquiry.
Thank you. I've got a couple of questions for you, but Dan, just real quick, when the initial announcement was made in August regarding broadband dollars that the governor was planning on trying to deploy to this, what was that original dollar amount?
It was $400 million, which is if you look through the various broadband items we have in here, it adds up to the 400 million.
Okay, so that's, I think,
this is part
helpful,
of that.
Yeah,
this
it's
is part
helpful
of that
to realize.
$400 million.
Yeah, this
Yes.
250 is a part of
Yes.
the whole, but this is the largest tranche of money in terms of actually putting either one fiber in the ground or working through towers or what have you. This is more like the infrastructure component, and the other is more like departmental broadband details.
I mean, this is certainly of that 400 million the biggest piece. But yeah, we've got the 100 cell towers item that we talked about last time. We talked about broadband for state parks, and so there's other various smaller, more niche kind of ones. But this is the biggest sort of broad program to get broadband access to our citizens.
Okay, I think that's important because when that initial announcement was made, I think that in terms of the types of contacts that we were receiving and questions that were being asked of us about the plan that was emerging, the thought was, a little over $400 million was going to be going to expand broadband to Missourians, and this is a good portion of that, but it's substantially less than the 400. But people just have to understand that there are other departmental elements, state parks, whatever, that are kind of benefiting from that whole pie, correct? So that would be a correct assessment?
Yes.
Okay. All right, good deal. Just a couple of details, and it would be interesting to get your take on this in terms of anecdotal experience from previous efforts when it comes to some of these types of new utility items, right? Where they're not necessarily a utility, but they're kind of becoming that. So in the community within which I live, years and years ago, the city entered into a rather lengthy contract with one provider, and basically there was a no competition component to that. I moved to that community well over 16 years ago, and that provider had no appetite to actually do anything in the area of town that I was living. And their business model was very passive. And to this day, I don't think, maybe a year ago, but I'm not interested anymore. But I think it was at least right at about 16 years before even the possibility of them offering a service. But they were the only entity that could provide service in town. So we had to find a way to get around that in order to be able to have ultimately what led to us being able to have high-speed internet. So that being said, I absolutely understand the importance of trying to operate efficiently and not putting money out there for grants that create redundancies where we're duplicating or doing something in triplicate form where we're spending a lot more money than what is needed. But there is the downside to creating a scenario where a vendor owns the right to that piece of property, and what happens if they no longer have the appetite to really press into, in say 8 years, doing something, but the market's locked down. That was an extremely frustrating experience, and I know that many people share that experience in other parts of the state as well. So thoughts on that component?
I think that's an important component that we have to look at. And knowing that that is true, you don't want to create an incumbent monopoly at the same time, trying to balance that between being smart about where we're spending state funds. I think it's a delicate balance to reach, and it's unique to each situation, but I do agree, and I've heard about it from other areas of the state, that it is a balance that the office and the state is going to have to look at where is the right place in that, on that scale. I agree completely.
Well, I'm certainly more of a fan of treading into waters to where we're having to figure that out than standing up a bunch of municipal-owned, broadband providers, right? Because I think that creates a whole nother set of issues. Government, one, not being in the broadband business. So the other thing is just, and I'm going to go ahead and just jump ahead so I don't have to do an inquiry again, but just in a few pages, we're going to be looking at, on page 141, the broadband affordability component. I've raised, 141.
Yeah.
I've raised this question, communicated a concern about efforts like this in previous hearings during the summer and fall, but we constantly communicate that we are looking to make broadband more affordable. We want it more affordable, and we know that as technology matures over time, costs for those services tend to reduce over time. The thing that I have some misgivings about in terms of this particular component on this $30 million is that it creates an ongoing obligation, because once you end up helping to subsidize the cost of something for people, we all understand government, we can say we can pull that back, but once you start subsidizing something, as soon as you start threatening pulling those dollars away and no longer subsidize, then we become mean-spirited, discompassionate kind of people, right? So once you start doing something in terms of supporting the cost for people who are struggling to pay for something, it's really difficult to stop that. And it works against lower prices. Because when you establish, and I know we're not established, and this is actually something the federal government's already doing, or, we've been we're the conduit for it, where there's that $50, up to $50 in terms of assistance on the cost of internet or broadband. If I'm a vendor, if I'm a provider, and I know that there's another source of revenue that my prospective customers can tap into, and they can get up to $50, I'm probably not going to be that concerned about working to get my prices down to $20 a month, because I know that those who are struggling to cover the cost of internet have access to government subsidy at $50. So my prices are probably going to hover 65, 70, whatever, because I know that $50 is already going to be covered if that person or that family or that household qualifies for a particular program. So we have to, my opinion, we have to be very careful on entering into a situation where we're subsidizing something while at the same time working to try to make something more affordable, because it actually works against ourselves. So that's just, again, that's just my economic opinion on that. But I can't see us justifiably starting a subsidy or maintaining one that's already been kind of created by the feds and ever anticipate us getting out of that down the road. So,
well,
comments?
I will say that is our intention. That when these ARPA funds run out, this subsidy will no longer be in place, is the intention of this administration. This is looked at more of just sort of a hand up in helping people, and hopefully as they are able to access broadband, it helps them with their employment opportunities, those other things where they then can be able to afford it on their own. But it is not our intention to make this an ongoing program. And I understand the difficulties you say, but that is what this administration intends this program to be. This is a coming out of the pandemic, just sort of a temporary benefit to help people get back on their feet, and having internet to be able to apply for jobs or work from home or those kind of things is something that's important for that, but is not something that we look at as an ongoing item in our budget.
Okay. Well, I understand that lines of inquiry like this will always get the person asking the questions pegged as somebody who doesn't care about people who are struggling. But at the risk of that, I absolutely understand we need to help people who are the most vulnerable in our state in a number of different ways. But this is specifically targeting the take-up rate, and we're trying to improve our take-up rate, and so I think the motives aren't necessarily purely just benevolent. There's also this desire to see in what is more defined as the underserved areas of the state where high-speed internet already exists, the take-up rate hasn't been what we think it ought to be. So we're trying to inspire greater interest in people accessing what is already accessible, but there might be an economic component to their decision not to take it up, right? So I know that there are services already that exist that help people who lack the resources to be able to own their own computer. They don't have a laptop, they don't have an iPad, they don't have a smartphone. We have resources and programs and libraries and other things where people will even come to them and help them do things. So I know that we've got social services kind of built around those types of needs already in place. This is just one of those things, similar to what Representative Deaton was mentioning earlier. This is one of those areas where it's just so easy for us to get the gravitational pull is very strong to begin to step into waters to where, I'm going to mix my metaphors, where the current begins to take over. So we've got gravity in the current, right? So we're coming very close in some areas where people would really like to turn broadband into a public utility, but we also are getting very close to a point where broadband is seen as something that is essential and therefore a quasi-right to access, which then means that we have government subsidies to help pay for that. And all those conversations are happening right now, so I'm not making this up. I just think that we have to be very cognizant. I understand what the governor's office is communicating. This is our intent. This is a one-time deal. But people in our seat are going to be the ones that are going to have to then take it on the chin later whenever those dollars run out. So,
yeah, I would just echo that the intention is that this is ARPA funded. Once these projects are over, that's the end of it. The other thing I would just like to point out is make sure we understand the lower price goes to the customer. The benefit goes to the provider to allow them to charge fewer, so it doesn't go to the customers. Yeah. So I just want to make sure we understand that completely. Yeah. But I think the two conversations that we're having are related. in a world of one provider and high cost, those two things do relate to one another, and I think you're absolutely right. But when I talk to a lot of communities and they talk about the adoption side of things, I see these literacy and affordability pieces as the Office of Broadband Development, of making sure not only are we getting access to people, but that they can take it once they have access to it in order to be able to fully take part in the economy that we have today. I think that's important, and hopefully on a limited frame, we're able to say, here, access, and then see the benefit from.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Representative John Black, you're recognized for an inquiry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think it's safe to say that a majority of the people in my district do not have 25.3. And so I get concerned when I see at least 120. And I hope that's not a hard cutoff. I hope, and I don't know what ARPA requires and if there is some minimum for ARPA that you have to meet, but I would hope your grant-making process would allow you to look at how many people are going to be served, even if it's at 50, 20 would be marvelous to many people in my district. And we've talked about before how unreliable your current information is if you're trying to get from the feds on census block. But I mean, I hope you can tell me that 120 is not a flat cutoff when somebody might be able to do a large area at lower speeds, but a whole lot better than what we have now.
Yes, just so we're clear, not having 100 by 20 is what considers you underserved. 25.3 being far below that would be an eligible area to be served. Our grant program will allow people to name their own project area, so they're not reliant on census block data. That's absolutely true. When it comes to the service being provided, the ARPA guidelines do allow for you to prove the reason to have to go below 100 by 20. So if they're able to prove a reasonable reason for that, that will all be a part of the scorable process for the grants that we're looking to put out. Yes.
Well, that's great, because I mean, I know you're getting this from everywhere, but there's a whole lot of the state that doesn't have decent service despite what the feds say.
You're absolutely right.
Representative Burnett, you're recognized for an inquiry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We're still on 134, right? Okay. So when I listen to this conversation, it really, I keep tying it back to, I'm really not that old to remember this, but I've learned about the phone system, the telephone, and its development, and how it was important that we go with one provider because it connected communities. And so it makes me wonder, when we are looking at these grant opportunities with public-private partnerships, are we also building in a component that would reward or give extra points for the cross municipalities? Because I think I can see how it's going to be pretty crucial that we have this kind of seamless, not just across the state, but really with our border states, across borders, right? On making sure that as our residents travel from one place to the next, they're going to be able to maintain their connection. And so has there been some examination on those kinds of partnerships?
I'm sorry. To date, we look at project areas and the service provided within that project area, the number of people served, the cost to serve, the investment from the private sector into that. All of that connection is interoperable, meaning a connection through one provider can connect to another. I'm not sure if that answers your question, though. It doesn't mean that if we move from one municipality to another, you will have the same provider. No.
Not,
but
yeah, no,
the
it doesn't
same-
have to be the same provider, same speed, for example, same.
Yeah, we would love to get to a point where everybody does. I mean, that's the ultimate goal, is to have great service everywhere. At this point, we're having to do it kind of by project area with willing provider and eligible area.
As you are not finished with your eligible or your criteria for your grant applications, correct?
That's correct, yes.
All right. Is there any of that any discussion about building that in to giving that enhancing that, incentivizing that effort?
Yes. Well, in the sense that the standard says if you're tapping into these funds, you're expected to be building to 100 by 100, in some cases 100 by 20. And so in that instance, yes, the things we build out now will live up to that standard. It doesn't mean everybody that was formerly served or is currently served will always have that level of service, but new builds will always be living up to that new level of criteria, yes.
Okay, all right. I think that's it for now. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Representative Riggs, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll try to be really brief. I want to establish a little more context about what the state fund does. So in terms of follow-on capital, the record to date, around $7 to 1. Is that correct?
I believe so.
All right. And the industry standard is 3.5, 4. So that fund has outperformed the industry standard. Is it a match or is it a gift?
The current state fund is a match. ARPA and these funds may not require the same level of match, but we will be scoring for private and local investment in these. So there will be some additional flexibility because of the size of the projects we're expecting and the goal of reaching the hardest to reach areas. So we're going to have to balance that with the amount of investment that may be provided. But yes, all of those things, the more private investment, the more local investment will score higher on our scorable sheet or scorable process.
And last and certainly not least, this fund is not operating in isolation. There are things out there called counties and cities that also have money.
Yeah.
Counties in particular are putting a lot into broadband. One in my district, Shelby County, created competition by saying, here's how much we have, make us proud. And the provider stepped up and said, we've got the north, we've got the south, problem solved. So just want everybody to understand this fund is something, it's not just what you see is what you get. The follow-on capital behind it is substantial, basically double your money almost immediately. But it's not just the only fund out there. Folks in the counties and the cities still have that option. And some cities actually built out networks because providers weren't doing anything. Yeah. So they have done it, taken the bull by the horns themselves. We had 3 of them in front of our committee did exactly that for that reason. So.
Yeah, I think that's a great point of we are looking to use this as a way to incentivize cities and counties to also invest in these infrastructure pieces as well. A great way to leverage funds and work together to have the most impact we can.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Representative Sander, you're recognized for an inquiry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. On the changing world of broadband, is there a place that anybody, business owners, students, or residents can go to find a map, like a GIS map of where grant has been awarded, where service is currently available, or where it's planned in the future?
Yes. The Office of Broadband website includes links to the maps we have currently available. And those include funded project areas, service areas as we understand them, on multiple levels of mapping.
And it shows the providers, I guess?
Yes.
And then if somebody wants to report or complain that there's no service, absolutely nothing available, is that something they can do there?
Yes, you can do it right there. We have a process where we follow up with every one of those concerns. We try to connect them with if there's a provider in the immediate area that may be able to bring service without getting involved as an office. We try to connect them as quickly as possible. Otherwise, we take note of those and keep files on each one of them.
Do you know if the maps list the parcel number? Like if someone's wanting to buy a property, open a business, can they go down that far? Is it just a whole census block? Or
you can get pretty granular with it, yes.
Is that complaint or report is different than the FCC complaint process? Is it like
it's going to show service providers in an area based off of FCC data, but we are more than willing to drill down to the actual location if someone contacts our office with it.
Thank you.
Yes.
Representative Shields, you're recognized for an inquiry.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I really will not take a lot of people's time, but I studied that map, and just because someone's won the auction does not mean that they have done anything. And they have like 8 years to not perform before they actually before they have to give up what they've won. So with that said, I feel really bad for all my neighbors who have zero service because somebody's won an auction and hasn't done anything about it. With that, will you come to my office and we will talk more? So thank you very much.
I certainly will.
Okay, folks, we're going to have to move on. We've had a lengthy conversation here. Clearly, there are many questions. Clearly, there's a lot of work to be done before the committee is at a level of comfort that we're prepared to move forward with this. So we've got a lot of work to do, a lot of questions to answer, and we've got, some 3 or 4 weeks to try to do that in before we start moving legislation forward. So, yeah, we'll keep working on that, but we're going to move on for today. And just a note on the time, folks, we have to turn the room over for a meeting at 3 o'clock. I would really like to get through House Bill 20, at least the first pass of that, before that time. So the rest of the week is uncertain. Obviously, the weather is questionable at best, and so we don't know if we'll be able to reschedule or reconvene at a later time this week. So let's move ahead as quickly as we can today, try to get as many questions out to the departments as we can, and then we'll just do the best we can with the inclement weather. So with that, we'll move on to the next topic, but before we do that, it appears Representative Meredith would like to be recognized.
Thank you. Just a question for you on that topic.
Okay.
You said just for this first pass. Are you pretty confident in saying that the intention is that we will do a subsequent pass of this? I think some of us might be more comfortable reserving detailed questions if we're sure that we're going to be coming back and doing another pass of this.
Yeah, my only hesitation to, saying that we will absolutely meet again to look at House Bill 20 again is the calendar and how time seem to get away with us. I certainly feel like that would be appropriate given the scope of what's been requested of us, and my comfort level would I would certainly appreciate another look at this as a committee. So I will commit to trying to make that happen, but without looking at the calendar and picking a date certain. I worry that time will get away from us, and we're losing time. The weather's not been helpful, and so it's not impossible that we might miss some part of the next couple weeks, and they're have to make decisions and move forward with spring break involved. So, yes, that would be my hope to take a second look at this, and I will try to make time in the schedule for that.
Okay, I appreciate that.
Okay, Dan, I think we're ready to move forward.
Okay,
Thank you.
So page 137 is the broadband assistance capacity building. This is for broadband coverage mapping efforts, feasibility analysis, and planning and technical assistance. Page 141 is what we talked about, is the $30 million broadband affordability item. Again, this also includes $10 million of budget stabilization fund, and just to be clear, it is certainly our intent that when these funds run out, this program will not be continued.
Representative Mayhew, you're recognized for an inquiry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The longer I go with this thing, the more uncomfortable I get with it. This thing keeps growing, 100 million here and 100 million there. Pretty soon you're talking about real money. But I would love it if you would come by my office. I have a dozen questions now. I have some real concerns about this. I mean, I don't even have a good comfort level of what it is we're spending money on. So I'll go through those questions offline, share them with the committee. As far as those answers are concerned, if you can come by my office. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Representative Wyndham, you are recognized for an inquiry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So going back to the previous item real quick, so will pricing be included in the mapping that for the broadband assistance and capacity building?
Can you repeat the question, Representative? I'm sorry.
Will pricing be a part of the previous item, which was the broadband capacity and assistance building, or assistance and capacity building?
Pricing hasn't been, like end user pricing hasn't necessarily been a component that we've thought about before, but it doesn't mean that it couldn't be asked to be included.
Okay, so I'm going to ask that y'all consider that. And then my other question is, and then that's moving on to the item that we're currently on, broadband affordability. Has there been any estimates on how many Missourians have taken advantage of the EBB, the Emergency Broadband Benefit, or library rentals for Wi-Fi hotspots? So where did we come up with that $30 million number?
The 30 million is an anticipated $10 benefit, or a $10 million benefit over each year for 3 years for a total of 30. So I'm assuming we're estimating a 1 million person uptake or user uptake.
Where'd you come up with that number? Is that just a proprietary number that was pulled out of a hat? Where'd the research come from that 16,000 households is what we need?
Yeah, I am not familiar with the entire background of the number.
Yeah, BJ's predecessor worked on that. We can get you the math on how we came up with that number.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, any other questions for the item on page 141? Seeing none, I think we'll go ahead and move on.
Page 144 is National Guard and Veterans Homes utility connections. This is the St. James Veterans Homes water and sanitary lines, $1 million for Camp Clark to connect to the City of Nevada sewer system, and $2.5 million Kansas City Airport extension. This would be for water and wastewater utilities to the Readiness Center and Field Maintenance Shop there of the National Guard. Page 149 is institutional fiber broadband installation. This is broadband and fiber to our Department of Corrections facilities. This will help with virtual hearings, virtual visits, those kind of things that we don't necessarily have the capacity to provide right now. Page 156 is DOC Corrections Facilities water and wastewater improvements. You can see on pages 157 and 158 the specific projects requested here. Page 162 is Area Career Center grants. There are 57 area career centers eligible. We would ask for a 25% match. This is $20 million to update or expand opportunities for students participating in career and technical education. This would be things like new buildings, new equipment, those kind of things.
So capital improvements projects, but not necessarily limited to.
Capital improvement projects, update equipment. Again, it'd be a 25% local match for these career centers.
Okay. Representative Nierenberg, you're recognized for an inquiry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I love career technical ed nearly as much as one of the members on this committee, and I just wanted to see if you have a list of these projects or projects.
These will be this will be a grant application, so the grants haven't been applied for yet.
And so how many, my understanding is there's a heck of a lot of these CTEs that need some funding and some massive capital improvement, actually just expansion, and I just feel like that 20 million isn't nearly enough for all the folks that I've been hearing from that need expansion of centers. There's some, I know that this has always been one of the governor's big priorities, and this is very small. So in comparison to an arena at the state fair, I think that we could put a lot more here. So anyway, I'm just curious as to how many CTEs we have in the state.
57.
57?
Yes.
And how many of those 57 would say that they need expansion or?
I think certainly all 57 are have the opportunity to apply for grants. Again, with the 25% match, that will help this money go farther as far as projects to be completed.
Okay. Okay. I look forward to looking at these more. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Representative Burnett, you are recognized for an inquiry.
Thank you. Are these state-operated centers, or are they?
Typically, they're operated by the local school districts.
Okay.
Page 165 is Agriculture and Innovation Workforce Grant. This is a $10 million competitive grant. This would be grants in conjunction with higher education institutions. And this will be a 50% match for this. It could be grants for agricultural workforce, agricultural innovation, agricultural production, supply chain. But this would be in conjunction with our universities. Page 168 is government transformation. This is $126 million to upgrade our IT infrastructure for the state of Missouri. So this is the state. This would upgrade our digital backbone to help us provide better customer service. The state's working on a lot of old legacy systems, and this would help us get us into a little more modern technology.
Okay, Dan, so you've got this that would cover multiple projects, multiple agencies. Is that correct?
Yes,
And then
yes.
then there are some other
There's a few specific
requests. Okay.
related requests for specific systems. This is more the backbone that allows us to do all those systems, the backbone that allow us to do more of the one-stop shop kind of thing. But there are, you'll see throughout here the next few pages, there are a couple of specific systems that we also want to upgrade, but it would be obviously compatible with this backbone that we would be putting in.
Okay, so can we get an idea of what the sum of the parts is that could get us to this number, and not for today, but just
The 126 here?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, certainly we have that, and certainly if anybody has specific questions, we're happy to have our CIO come talk to anybody offline on this. But yeah, we'll get you the how we got to the 126, 135. That's a pretty specific number, so we've got a list to get there.
Thank you. Okay. Representative Mayhew, you're recognized for inquiry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Okay, so just make sure I got the numbers and the chronology right here. I think originally we were talking, and admittedly it was last year, that we were in the $88 million category for this backbone. If I remember correctly, over the summer, perhaps Representative Ritchie has a little bit of information on that.
I don't remember 88 off the top of my head. I know we were looking at various things, but this is the number over the, we worked with the cabinet, our CIO, our OAIT through the fall, and this is the number that we came up with is what we think we're going to need to upgrade.
Okay, so there's another $117 million for a similar kind of a thing I saw somewhere, and I'm sorry, these numbers are all running together on me, but it seems like we were talking about.
So you may be thinking of the statewide ERP system, the statewide accounting system that we put into the budget 3 or 4 years ago. That's about a $100 million system. Again, that would be in addition to this. That's money that's through our core funding we already have in the budget for that, that's being developed. And in fact, the RFP was completed a week or so ago, and we got through the challenge period with nobody challenging that bid. So we've got the vendor in place. We're going to start moving forward with that. That's in addition to this.
Can somebody, I don't know if it's coming from OA or from your office, give us a one-sheeter on all of these technology improvements? I'm talking computer systems, because now I've got the portal running together in my mind with whatever this is, plus with whatever you're talking about.
We can try to put together maybe 1.5 pages. But yeah, we'll get a succinct document to you.
Well, so, I always kind of had in my mind that we were doing like $100 million going to fix
right.
all of our stuff, right?
Now, the $100 million that we had before this was just the statewide accounting system, which includes budgeting and personnel also, which is one of our biggest systems, but that certainly is not everything. And that's not really backbone. That's a specific system. And look, you get much past backbone and specific system, and I'm out of my depth here as a budget guy. But yeah, we'll put together a one-pager of sort of what's in the budget in the IT realm as far as this. We'll see what we can do for you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, folks, we have some inquiries piling up here. We've got 3 on this item, and my ask is to move as expeditiously as we can. Representative Burnett, you are recognized for an inquiry.
Very quickly, is this part of the $400 million?
No.
This is not.
This is not considered. We don't consider this broadband, no.
Okay, thank you.
Representative Ritchie, you are recognized for an inquiry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Director. I think this is, as I'm reading it, this is the discussion we've been having for quite some time on the portal. So that is what this is. It is like kind of the overlay to provide citizens the opportunity to have one point of access to all things state bureaucracy ultimately, right?
Ultimately, yes.
Yes.
But we need the sort of
journey
behind the
mapping,
scenes
yeah.
technology to be able to get there, and that's what this is.
So you've got the journey mapping, which
Yes.
basically gives us the ability to map out the typical, most often utilized services, so that we can streamline that, keep it as efficient as possible for citizens and even startups and established businesses or whatever down the road. That's
Yes.
the ultimate
Yes.
goal, right?
Yes.
And then you also have some of the office solutions in this amount as well to work toward office efficiencies within departments, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, this would retire some of our out-of-date Microsoft Office things and things like that. So yes, it would be both helping our employees become more efficient through the IT products that they have, and helping our public-facing IT infrastructure to be more citizen-friendly.
Yeah. The question, as all of this has been emerging, do you, or maybe Mr. Wan would be able to speak to this more specifically, but do you see this right here targeting ultimately an app-oriented technology, or is this just simply a website that we, because that's one detail that seems to be a little fuzzy to me.
That's beyond me. I'll let Jeff handle that one.
Jeff Wan, Chief Information Officer, ITSD. What this covers is four main things. Right now, the infrastructure that we have in the state was architected in 2004. We're way beyond that. We need to upgrade our infrastructure, and we're talking specifically about the applications infrastructure. And so this covers four main things. It covers the portal technology, and it also covers the applications technology that it needs to make those portals work. So workflow and business rules and those kinds of things. It also covers creating what we call data lakes, so that we can share data in between different departments, so that people don't have to put data in multiple times over and over again, and so that we can have accurate data across. It also covers the collaboration tools, so that we can collaborate department to department and with our citizens. So this is the core that enables us to build upon that and build modern applications to meet the needs of our citizens and our
And then ultimately beyond this, which is reflective of a much broader need that we are often discussing year to year, you have particular systems that are aging out that need to be replaced. So this isn't necessarily addressing aging out siloed systems necessarily. This is creating the overlay where we can pull that data, make it easily accessible for the citizen, and also work towards some efficiencies in the office context.
That is correct.
Okay.
And we did a modernization, rationalization of all of our mainframe applications last year, and we were prioritizing those, and some of them are before you in different categories. And then this year we're doing that for all the non-mainframe, so that we put a roadmap together to modernize all of our applications over a given period of time.
So just for the benefit of the committee, this is the thing we've been talking about going back to last June, that would give our departments the ability to communicate more effectively, because we do have one-off siloed systems that don't communicate with one another. Even our approach staff have a hard time with being able to pull certain details from different departments because systems don't communicate. This would put us in a position where we can get much closer to where that data that's statutorily possible to share can be shared more easily and work towards some efficiencies. Last thing, and then I'm really trying to be quick on this. This is just a huge project, and it is a very big idea and that we've been tackling. what I am planning on doing, I've spoken with OA on this as well. I'm looking at including language in the budget that would chart a course in getting this going, because a lot of these components of the project can be done very quickly. But the RFP process, we could lose 18 months to 24 months just like that, as if that's quick to spend 18 months. But you know what I'm saying? I mean, RFP process can really slow us down, and we don't have a whole lot of time. So what I'm planning on doing is going ahead and bringing an amendment on language that would chart these dollars toward the NASPO or existing contracts route. That will shave off tremendous amount of time. It's still fair. It's appropriate to use. We use those processes already anyway. But that would get us to a point where some of these things we could have done within 6 months if everything fell in line the way that it should. So
That is absolutely accurate, and that's what we are planning to do.
because we do have kind of negative momentum when it comes to IT projects historically, where we've lost a lot of time and we've spent twice as much money as we initially thought it was going to cost us. So that will help us to get it done efficiently and show that we can actually score a win on something that will have a tremendous positive effect on everybody, state employees included. So I appreciate your work on that. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, I think we're ready to move on.
Okay, page 172 is one of those systems that we do want to replace. It's the Grain Regulatory Services System. Currently have a vendor support suite. The software is outdated and may soon be unsupported. This is $1 million to replace that system. Page 175 is the automated child support system. The system is used to distribute more than $750 million annually. It's over 20 years old. Again, this would be to replace that legacy system. Page 178 is the Rock Island Trail development. I want to point out that this includes $19 million of budget stabilization funds for a total of $50 million ARPA and $19 million budget stabilization funds for a total of $69 million. This would complete a 78-mile section of the trail running from Eugene to Beaufort.
Representative Mayhew, you're recognized for an inquiry.
So another one, I'm going to need somebody to come by and talk to me about this. I'd like to see, not now, Mike. I just need what will we spending the money on? I know you've got a list of things here, but we're looking at almost $1 million a mile. I can build an interstate highway with $1 million a mile. So I'd kind of like to know what it is that we're spending money on that. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Representative Nierenberg, you're recognized for an inquiry.
Okay, I'm confused now. I wasn't going to ask anything, but $1 million a mile, I'm confused how we got to that calculation. So can somebody explain that?
So I just looking at the description here, 70-mile section there in the description in the book, and it's $69 million. So is that the math on that $1 million a mile almost? Representative
So it's a 78-mile section, is that right, Mr. Sutherland?
Correct.
And, we're looking at $69 million. I mean, there's structural considerations in here too that might be consuming a lot of this.
Yeah,
I'm not
there
saying
is.
that's a bad number. I just want to see what it is we're spending the money on.
Yeah, if you could just give a really brief, because that's what I figured. It's not going to be every mile is $1 million.
Yeah,
but I
and
assume that there's some big things.
That's
there
absolutely correct. And actually, of the whole corridor is 144 miles, and this is 78 miles of it. And I think the logic of doing it at the beginning was a portion of it is the most challenging, and because there are 3 tunnels, 2 bridges over some pretty major rivers, and that is where a significant amount of the cost is. Each of you should have received one of these kind of booklets that has the Rock Island Trail kind of information in it. You may not have it. It was a few weeks ago that we got one to everybody.
No, I've got it.
And so in that, there is a potential cost of development section, and we can get you all of this. But the sections from Eugene to the Gasconade River is about, let's see, 50 million of that. So that's a significant portion of it is just that small section, but there are 3 major tunnels and 2 major bridges in that, and that's where most of the cost is. Now you get to other, and you're absolutely right, representatives, that there are other parts of the corridor, the trail development, the cost of the trail will be very much less than that because it's very easy to do because the rail line's basically there and there aren't those major things. So that's what causes that to look a little bit out of skew. If you spread that over the entire 144 miles, it's still significant cost. We have that in this book too. But the most expensive parts are and challenging parts are what are in the area that would be funded. So that's why the cost is a little higher.
Yeah, and then just a quick follow-up. We talked extensively about, Katy Trail in here as well, in the tremendous economic, reward that's been across the state, and especially for a lot of those small communities along the trail. And what's the projected economic development?
Well, we've had we have a, and I'll get that to you.
Yeah.
There was a study done both on the Katy Trail, but that's a little old. It was done in 2012. But then there was a more recent study done on the potential for the Rock Island Corridor. I don't have those numbers with me.
That'd be great. Again,
I'll
just
get
to
those
see
to you.
that.
But there are towns and pretty significant towns, all the way across the corridor, and the corridor, the Rock Island Corridor, runs right through the middle of those towns. So not only is it important to many of those towns, and throw out like Versailles, Owensville, Eldon, and just to name a couple of them, is that the rail corridor really provides a access through the entire town. Those towns I just mentioned, Gerald is another one, that it goes right by their school, and so it really connects the safe routes to school. It really connects community together.
So it's not just tourists or people going through,
right.
Yeah. That's
So
wonderful.
there's that too, but there's also in many of these communities, and then connecting communities is another significant portion of this.
Yep.
So
If you could share that with the committee, sure, appreciate it. Okay.
Will do.
Okay, I think we got all our questions answered for now. Thank you.
Okay, page 180 is the Capitol Complex FirstNet coverage. This is to increase the cellular coverage around the Capitol and the Capitol Complex area here. The cellular coverage, because of so much use, is spotty, and also if there are other issues where law enforcement and that has to be here, this would help with that coverage. On page 184 is MOSWIN, the Zone 5 addition. This is the Zone 5 for the Missouri Statewide Interoperability Network. This additional space allows for growth. It's not only in Zone 5, but it takes traffic off the other zones to allow those to better function. And this is the interoperability network is where the Highway Patrol can communicate to local law enforcement. Local law enforcement can communicate to their fire. So this is really important for the state to be able to have this system functioning properly. Page 188 is...
We have a question, Dan,
okay.
sorry. Representative Burnett, you are recognized for an inquiry.
Thank you. I know it's been a while, but I recall looking at this on page 61 with the Capitol Complex. Can you tie those together for me, please?
The MOSWIN and the Capitol Complex on page 61?
Yes, and then we have DPS MOSWIN.
Okay, go ahead.
Good afternoon, Brian Courtney, Director of the Interoperability Office.
Mr. Director, will you make sure your mic is on that green light there? There you go. Thank you.
Push the...
Push. Yeah, technology. So the earlier request was for additional coverage and channels in the Capitol Complex. We're reaching that threshold where during surge incidents, planned weather events, it's busying out the system. So we need those additional channels on the network. To be able to plug those channels in for that subsystem to work, the master core is required because, simply put, our thumb drive's full. It has a finite number of resources you can put into a master site, and our Zone 1 and 3 master sites are full. Zone 2, City of St. Louis system. Zones 4 is the Springfield system. So this is an opportunity to utilize these funds for this core. If not, we'll have to come back with an NDI.
So would it be possible for us to get something that, a document that shows how these relate, how these related items?
Yeah, I've got that for
Okay.
you. Yeah, I'll get that.
I would appreciate that. Thank you.
You bet.
Okay, page 188 is Department of Corrections camera system and video storage. The department's camera systems are beyond their end of life. They're no longer supported by the manufacturer. This request would replace those systems with built-in redundancies for our facilities. Page 193 is Department of Corrections radio replacement. Again, they are reaching the end of life. The systems are, let's see, where was it here? Older than 6 years, which is getting to the end of the manufacturer's recommended lifespan. Page 198 is electronic health records for our Department of Mental Health. This is both the Division of Behavioral Health and Division of Developmental Disabilities. Their current systems are not capable of meeting all the CMS regulations regarding the transmission of patient information. Page 202 is One Health Lab capital improvement. This is $78 million. This would be combining the health labs for our Department of Health, Department of Ag, DNR, and also conservation. Currently, health labs are beyond capacity. So we would need to replace some of these specific health labs. So we think it makes more sense to just build one health lab for all these entities. Also, it would help us with sort of, cross collaboration and some of those kind of things. So this is $78 million for a new One Health lab. Page 208 is another computer system. This is the Division of Youth Services case management system. This system was originally built in 1975. A modernized system will help with case notes, court documents, treatment documents, etc. Page 211 is Victims of Crimes funding. This is $24 million to go to victims of crime. Page 217.
Dan, I want to back up just a second there on this VOCA piece. This is just a supplemental
Yeah, this is supplementing
appropriation
yes.
in addition to the VOCA grant,
Yes.
federal VOCA
Yes.
grant that we get.
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
so it's proposed.
It doesn't replace it, it just supplements it.
Okay, and is this 1 year, 1 fiscal year's worth? Since those are those 2-year grant cycles or?
How many?
So would this be for 1 grant cycle or 1 fiscal year, I think is the question.
Yeah, I think.
Patrick Living, Department of Social Services. The 24 million would be for sort of one contract period, which runs about 2.5 years once we award that contract. Hopefully in April, it would run through April 1st, so about 2.5 years from April 1st. So the 24 million wouldn't be per year, it'd be the total.
Over the grant cycle.
Right, is what we would be expecting.
So there'd be at least 1 reappropriation needed, maybe 2, if it were 2.5 years. Okay.
Correct.
And is this amount the difference between what the federal grant has been in the past and what it is now?
It gets us closer. So right now we're at 19. It had gotten up to 60 million. Right now, when we're looking at holding them steady where they're at, we need to be around a total of 51 million, approximately in that range. The grant last year was 19. We think it'll stay at 19 next year. But hopefully in future years, they are seeing some additional revenues, but we can't get any verification from the feds. But hopefully in future years, that will go up to 40 million. If the grant does go up over the next couple of years, that 24 million will basically keep us steady through that 2.5-year contract at around 50 million. If we don't see future increases, we'll be 15 million short in the future, but we
think what we're hearing over the next 2 years, that should get us there.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Lubring.
Okay, so that takes us to page.
Sorry, Representative Burnett, you are recognized for an inquiry.
Thank you. Is this in addition to the 12 million that was in the supplemental?
Yeah, the 12 million would have been spending through the end of this fiscal year. This will be spending starting July 1st.
Okay. So,
Oh, I'm sorry, it's 24 total, my mistake.
okay,
Yeah.
all right, thank you.
So it'd be,
Well, now I'm confused. If you get your $12 million appropriation to be spent by FY22, it'll be gone, then 24 would be for FY23, and the next cycle.
The 12 million would be considered a part of the 24 million, so we're not going to get a total of 36, it's just a total 24. The 12 million gets us their early start so we can release the contracts that we've been kind of holding on, or we've just been extending the last couple months. So my understanding is that it's a 24 million in total. So say out of the early sub, if you would spend part of that, say $4 million, then this would be dropped to 20 million.
Okay, so another way to say that would be you all are requesting a $24 million supplement to the VOCA grant cycle that we're getting ready to enter into.
Yes.
Which would last for about 2.5 years.
Yes.
Yep, okay.
yeah, it's.
Okay, that's
over
as clear as
multiple
mud.
Yeah, it's,
Yeah.
it's, the federal fiscal year sort of is different
Yeah,
than
it's
ours, and so it makes
complicated.
it a little difficult.
Yeah,
but we
yeah.
will not spend more than 24 million, I think is the bottom line.
Okay, I appreciate that. All right, let's move on. Thank you.
Okay, so page 217 is another computer system that we want to upgrade. This is the child support portal. Building this would reduce the need for clients to come in person and have to wait in line or to utilize the call center. They could do it online. Page 222 is $5 million to the judiciary.
We have a question, Dan. I'm sorry to interrupt you.
Okay.
Representative Unsicker, you're recognized for an inquiry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Going back to page 217, well, at least back to the child support and child services, is there any money in this budget for prevention of child abuse and neglect?
Well, this is more in the ARPA budget. No, because this is more one-time funds, and so that's more of an ongoing resource. So not in this bill.
So we have the Families First Act, which
There is funding in the regular budget for that, but
funding
not
the
in
regular budget,
which is
but
ongoing
I understand
funding.
that there's
But
struggles to get to that funding. So I was wondering if we could use some one-time funds to.
we do not have it structured that way in our budget. We have ongoing funds in the FY23 budget for Family First, but we don't have one-time money.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Representative Ritchie, you're recognized for an inquiry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a placeholder. Mr. Wan, if you could come to my office and talk about some of these other IT projects related to these portal ideas, that would be great. I just want to make sure we're not getting too redundant with multiple single points of access, and then we don't really have a single point of access anymore. Thank you.
Yeah, I'd like to add on to that. I share Representative Ritchie's curiosity about this child support portal and how that might be different than the one portal and why we wouldn't just incorporate it into the one portal. So I will look forward to hearing about the results of that conversation. Thank you.
Okay.
Let's move on.
Page 222 is $5 million for court security and technology. This could be used for security at the courts or for technology upgrades for the courts. Mr. Chair, that takes us to the higher ed projects, although before we get to the higher ed projects, there are a couple of items that start on page 304 that are more the administrative ones. If we could maybe knock those out real quick, and then we can come back to the higher ed projects. So if we can skip to page 304, this is 5 FTE that would only be through the.
Okay, hold on just a second. Dan, I think what you'd like to do is skip to these last few bits
And then
and
come
go
back to
back
these.
to.
Yeah,
we're
I'm
going to
not-
go back to higher education. Is that your question,
No.
Representative? Okay. Representative Riggs, you're recognized for inquiry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. 222. I'm just kind of curious as far as what the strategic plan looks like, who's in, who's out. We talked about eliminating the silos. There's $5 million for the courts for stuff. I'm just trying to figure out when you do this master plan for all of these silos to get busted down, are the courts part of that? Conservation part of that? MoDOT part of that? I'm just trying to figure out who the players are, and we're looking for this, portal, whatever. How does all this work? Is everybody on the same page, under the same umbrella, or we got folks out there doing their own thing?
Well, the courts as a separate branch of government get to make their own decisions on this. Let me say it that way. Versus, obviously, OAIT with state departments, we can make sure everybody's on the same page.
Everybody?
Well, look, some of the commissions are.
You see my point.
Yeah, no, I see your point, and we are working with that, but there are some statutory and constitutional barriers to doing that. Totally.
Silos.
Yes.
Thank you.
The ones we control, we are trying to break down those as much as we can. As far as the executive branch.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Okay, on the topic, I don't think anyone's here from the judiciary this afternoon, but actually, maybe so. A spin plan on the $5 million would be helpful to tell us, kind of, Representative Riggs made a good point. What is this stuff? A little more specifically, that would be helpful. Thank you very much. Okay, and we're moving on to 304, then we'll go back.
So these next 4 items are basically just the staffing that we need to administer these grant programs in that sort of in the for the state. So the first one is OA accounting. These would be 5 additional FTE. These FTE would go away as soon as the ARPA funding is fully expended, but to spend an additional $2.8 billion, our Division of Accounting is going to need more help to be able to process these payments timely and make sure that our vendors get paid timely, along with doing all their current duties like getting state employees paid and making sure that we're accounting for all the money properly. So that is page 304. Page 310 is FMDC. This is 4 additional folks for our facilities design and maintenance division. Again, we are running a lot of projects through these folks, and while we have this ARPA money, we're going to need some additional folks to do the design, project managers, those kind of things, so that we can get this money spent by the ARPA deadline, spend it efficiently. Page 314, again, is 3 FTE for purchasing. Again, we want to make sure that purchasing is not a bottleneck as far as getting these programs and projects accomplished. Because of state purchasing law, it's not always as easy as it just going out and buying something. And so we want to have additional folks. Again, these folks would only be here through the ARPA time period, but we want to make sure that we can get all these RFPs and everything else processed and moving so that we can get these projects going. And on page 319 is the Department of Economic Development. Again, they have significant grants throughout this book, and these would be the people that would administer those grants. And so I just wanted to hit those before we really got into the higher ed stuff. Those are just, you can't do $2.8 billion without some additional people. Again, these are people that once ARPA is completed, those positions will be removed from the state budget.
Representative Mayhew, you're recognized for an inquiry.
Yeah, real quickly, brand new positions. We're not moving folks from existing.
Brand new positions. We may take some of our experienced folks to get them in here and then backfill those with other folks, but these are brand new positions.
Okay, and that's every one of these where we've got FTE, same kind of a thing.
Yes.
We're trying to find some new people.
Yes, we need more people to deal with this much money running through our state budget temporarily.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
And then, Mr. Chair, the higher ed projects, how do you want to handle those?
Yes. So I think from pages 225 to 303 are just the capital improvements projects that have been recommended by the governor for higher education. Is that right?
Yeah, and what we did is we went to every institution and we took their top priority. So this is identified by the institutions as their top priority, with some vetting from us, obviously. But these are their top priorities at each of these campuses, and that's what we have funded through here.
Okay. So I think rather than go by these item by item, because I think, probably generally speaking, the committee has a relatively high level of awareness around these, particularly the ones that are for their respective local higher education institution. That I'd rather open the committee to questions on the topics, if anybody has any, and then as you have the time, respectively, you can go through and kind of drill down on the details about the proposed project. So with that, Representative Black, you are recognized.
Yeah, just to inquire real quick, Dan, just make sure what I think I know may be somewhat accurate, or what match is going to be there, and how much flexibility are in these. Because my understanding was, to begin with, everybody's going to be treated as close to the same as possible. It's going to be impossible for it to be exactly the same, but as close as possible. So just an overall view of how that's supposed to work through. Thank you.
Yes. So one, this is just to make sure I'm clear. This is our both our four-year institutions and our community colleges and state tech. Everyone is included in here. It's a 50% state match for projects that are below $60 million. If it's a project above $60 million, it's a 25% match. I think all of those projects are University of Missouri projects, but what we wanted to do is, there were some big projects there that we wanted to support, but if we did a 50-50 match with them, that would have taken up a significant amount of this funding and maybe crowded out some of these other projects. So to be fair, if it's an under $60 million project, which is all of them outside of the University of Missouri, is a 50% match. Those other ones above 60 million is a 25% match. The amount above 60 is 25%. So if it's if it's a $100 million program, then the 40 million between 60 and 100 is a 25% match.
I just have one comment. That's pretty cool how you try to use the word fair in there with all those people sitting behind you. That's I love that. That was a good risk. Dan, thank you. Bye-bye.
That may not be their definition of fair, but it's my definition of fair.
Fair enough.
Thank you, Mr.
Okay. Any other further questions about specific CI projects for higher education? No? Okay. Well, I think that's a good place to go ahead and conclude on House Bill 20 then, and I do think we should reconvene and revisit this at a later time. So please, with the follow-up responses from the departments, continue to work on this, and then we'll try to have another hearing where we can go back through this and look at these a second time. And with that, I think we're ready to move on to the Department of Conservation. Thank you, Dan. And thank you to the departments who joined us today for the hearing on House Bill 20. Good afternoon, folks. Thank you for joining us. If you would, please introduce yourselves to the folks at home and proceed when you're ready. One quick comment. We have about 30 minutes before we have to turn the room over, and you do have a lot of tabs in your book here, but it would be really great, and I'm sure you would also appreciate if we were able to conclude this in 1/2 an hour, then have some conversations and follow-up questions at a later time. So please proceed when you're ready.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. For the record, my name is Sarah Parker-Pauley, and I serve as Director of the Missouri Department of Conservation. And I think, Mr. Chair, with your introductory comments, I'm going to maybe skip through some of my introductory comments.
I don't want to make you feel rushed, but at the same time, just for your consideration and ours, that's why I call your attention to the time. So
I really appreciate
that.
So you're going to see me turning some pages, and we're going to get right to the numbers. If you'll note on page 6, the 3 largest revenue sources for the department are, of course, the sales tax at about 61%, hunting and fishing permit sales at about 19%, federal reimbursements is at about 14%. Department's budget represents about 0.6% of the total state operating budget. And as a reminder, we received no general revenue. The governor's recommendation for fiscal year 23 is $179.9 million, which does include about $8.7 million in new decision items, which we will cover as we go through the book. The first new decision item is on, and by the way, I will be bringing up quickly, as we go through each of, we have 3 goals, and you might remember we went through a reorganization about 3 years ago, and so our budget is reflective of that, and so each deputy director will be coming up and explaining new decision items under each of those 3 goals, but I'm going to hit a couple of them, and the first one is on page 13, and it is the continuation of the governor's fiscal year 22 pay plan, and the next decision item is on page 43. This is the spending authorization for the governor's fiscal year 23 pay plan, which replaces the department's pay plan on page 80. The next decision item I want to just bring to your attention, it's found on page 111, and it's Recovering America's Wildlife Act, or RAWA, by the way, co-sponsored by Senator Blunt, and also co-sponsored by U.S. Representative Hartzler, Cleaver, Long, and Luke DeMeyer in the House. This federal legislation would provide about $1.4 billion annually to states, territories, and tribal fish and wildlife agencies to implement their state wildlife action plans, which are basically focused on species in decline or rare, so species in trouble. As this legislation has not yet passed Congress, the governor has not recommended the NDI at this time, but we will be closely monitoring the passage of this historic legislation and would intend to bring this back when it's passed into law. The next new decision item is on page 124. This request is for $640,400, which would allow the department's IT team to execute several needed projects, which include radio encryption, conservation agent vehicle connectivity, FleetWave maintenance increase, Adobe license subscriptions, identity access management system, and an MDC office door access maintenance. Several of these projects revolve around the safety and efficiency of our agents, and others involve the efficiency of our employees and the systems that they use. At this time, I'm going to ask Deputy Director Mike Hubbard, Dr. Mike Hubbard, to present the committee on Goal 1, MDC Takes Care of Nature. Yes, sir.
Madam Director, we do have one question.
Yes.
Representative Ritchie, you are recognized for an inquiry.
Thank you. Very quickly.
Yes.
The question that was asked by the gentleman from the Riggs District, you guys function outside of ITSD, right?
Do.
So,
yes.
Are you as a department interested, willing, and ready to come into the family, if you will, of a one point of access to all things state bureaucracy, so that when someone wants to, on their phone, renew their tags, and also to renew their fishing license, they can do so on that one application?
Yeah, and we do similar efforts even with recruiting. So there's kind of one portal for anyone interested in a job, and they can directly click on MDC link by going in through the one hub. So we would certainly be happy to have that conversation.
So there's and obviously the devil's in the details, but there's at least a general appetite to be able to participate in that kind of application-oriented dashboard or portal, so that those types of activities can be easily accomplished by citizens in Missouri.
Sure, I'm sure we can figure out a way to link them into our system through this main portal, but we're happy to have the conversation. You bet.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, please proceed.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, representatives. As the director said, my name is Mike Hubbard. I'm Deputy Director over the Resource Management. And I'm going to talk about MDC's Goal 1. MDC Takes Care of Nature. Begins on page 132 with a request of just over $34.5 million for fiscal year 2023 for habitat management on public land and helping private landowners manage their lands for fish, forest, and wildlife. The program description starts on page 145 and includes some of the measures we are tracking related to priority geographies, water quality monitoring efforts, and feral hog removal. If there are no questions, I will move quickly on to the next section. Okay, I'm going to keep moving, Representative. Goal 1 also includes fish and wildlife management, which begins on page 151. We are requesting $30.8 million with one new decision item. A description of this program starts on page 164 and includes our measures, including citizen use of MDC apps, cooperative agreements, resource law enforcement contacts, population objectives for various game and fish species, and the wildlife code compliance rate. The new decision item for $200,000 starts on page 172 and will be used towards fish production costs, including fish food, liquid oxygen, and increased contract opportunities with private fish producers to help minimize impacts on our operations while we are renovating Bennett Springs Hatchery. That concludes everything in Goal 1. And at this time, if you would like, I'll go ahead and have Mr. Jeffries come up and work on Goal 2.
Good afternoon, committee members. Aaron Jeffries, Deputy Director. I handle Goal 2, which is MDC Connects People with Nature. Starting on page 178 for fiscal year 2023, we're requesting $15.7 million to help connect people with nature through recreational opportunities on conservation areas and in communities. Description starts on page 190 clue and has a variety of measures related to technical assistant contacts with communities and partners, number of citizens engaged in conservation, and then information on our Missouri Recreational Access Program as well. There is a new decision item on page 198, $430,000 to expand the Missouri Recreational Access Program. This is where landowners voluntarily enroll their land to provide public access. Very popular out west and as well as here in Missouri. This would expand it to 30,000 acres here in the state. Another new decision item on page 205 is $200,000 to create a pilot program for a biodiversity credit trading program with Missouri Soybean Association, MFA, and Ecosystem Services Market Consortium. The pilot will basically allow landowners to enroll their field borders into pollinator plots, warm season grasses. In returns, they would get a biodiversity credit that a consortium could then purchase for the private industry. Hoping to enroll up to 3,000 acres in field borders through that program. Another new decision item on page 212 of $500,000 to match local partners to implement community conservation challenge grants in both Springfield and St. Louis. This is similar to the program that we implemented 2 years ago in Kansas City. Basically in underserved areas to train college-age individuals in native plant management, native plant maintenance. They would then have an opportunity to go on and provide that service in their community at a later date. Has been extremely popular in Kansas City and just wanting to expand that opportunity. Moving on, there is a new decision item on 218 of $377,000 to complete radio replacement projects statewide, including 5 radio repeaters in the Northeast region. These repeaters support wildlife code enforcement, officer safety, and fire suppression around the state. Moving on to the second part of Goal 2, which is education and communication activities. This starts on page 224. For fiscal year 2023, we are requesting $17 million with no new decision items. A description of the program starts on page 238, and this would include measures such as our Discover Nature Schools program, a number of individuals that have signed up for the Conservationist or Explorer magazine, or the number of individuals taking part in department programs. Mr. Chairman, that concludes Goal 2. If there aren't any questions, we'll move on to Jennifer Batson-Warren.
Okay, please proceed. Thank you. Oh, I spoke too soon. Okay, she's got a plan here.
I do.
Representative Shields, you are recognized.
Thank you very much. I just want to say I love the programs that you've been offering virtually, and I know that comes from that department. That is a great way for us to really get a lot of people engaged in conservation. That's all I want to say. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman.
Good afternoon. Please proceed. Thank you.
Members of the committee, thank you.
Again, my name is Jennifer Batson-Moore, and I'm a Deputy Director with the Missouri Department of Conservation. I have responsibility for Goal 3. First part of Goal 3 I'll run through today is MDC maintains the public trust. Goal 3 begins on page 245 with our conservation business service functions. We are requesting $54.1 million with one new decision item. Funding for this area provides support for the agency's other goals. So as you can imagine, all the business support functions, whether it be operational excellence, policy coordination, financial services, information technology support, fleet management, fuel, infrastructure administration, facilities operation, and maintenance. The program description starts on page 261 and includes measures on the number of hunting and fishing license holders, staff training efforts, heavy equipment usage hours, online permit sales, and construction budget costs. We do have one new decision item, and it starts on page 272, and this is pertaining to heavy equipment replacements in the amount of $550,000. Conservation utilizes heavy equipment for our public infrastructure and habitat efforts and maintains a fleet to provide access to staff to complete those responsibilities. This funding is needed to continue our replacement schedules for our heavy equipment and to ensure the reliability, safety, and operability of our heavy equipment fleet. Projected cost for this equipment is anticipated to increase, has already. We've seen significant increases in all of our equipment. So right now we're anticipating a 5% increase for our vehicle fleet, marine, UTV, ATV replacements, a 10% increase for trailer replacements, and 15% for heavy equipment. There is an NDI starting on page 278 regarding property insurance. When the budget was developed, the property insurance rates were increasing. Upon discussion with the Conservation Commission, we decided to become fully insured for our properties and no longer need this decision item. Therefore, the governor did remove it from his recommendation. On page 239, we have our core request of $19 million for staff development and benefits, which is the second part of our Goal 3 focus. This includes our recruitment, retention, benefits, performance management, and employee development. There is one NDI. That program description starts on page 303 and includes measures for our number of salaried positions filled each year, the training courses offered to staff, our retention rates, and medical premium trends for the Conservation Employee Benefits Plan and retention rates. There is an NDI starting on page 308 regarding the increase to our health insurance premiums. The Conservation Employees Benefit Plan Board of Trustees does work with the plan's consultants each year to review claims expenses, and plan revenues to project costs for the coming plan year. As a result of the analysis, the board voted to increase our health insurance premiums by 2% for the second half of calendar year 2022. And this will result in a commission and employee increase in contributions of 2%. That is all I have to share, and we'll be happy to answer any questions.
And Mr. Chairman, just very briefly, there is another NDI on page 284 to fund the Operational Excellence Coordinator, which I believe you've seen in other agencies' budgets as well.
Yes, we have. Thank you. And Representative Ritchie, you are recognized for an inquiry.
Thank you. Just real quick, kind of an overarching question here as far as the source of dollars that you guys operate with that we all are aware of. When looking at, and I don't mean to jump out of this book, but there is a benefit that MDC is receiving through the ARPA portion as well. So when I'm looking at your budget request that through the governor's recommendation, your funds that are available, are you sitting in a good place?
Are we sitting in a good place?
Yes. Oh, like for instance, if you were to expend everything that you're identifying in this, are you in a healthy financial position with the expenditures that are being expected and the revenues coming in through the normal means?
I would say so. Our commission on a monthly basis reviews our financials. We certainly, as we go through our budget workshop with them,
Good.
Okay. We're looking at revenues and comparing that to expenditures.
I'm not leading you to some kind of like, gotcha moment. I wanted to make sure because one of the things that was kind of stuck out in, to me as we were going through the other book, in particular on the the stormwater flooding repairs for the George O. White State Forest Nursery.
Yeah.
That was something that occurred back in 2016, and it's such a small project in scope. I'm just wondering why that wasn't something that was taken care of through the Conservation Commission Fund. And it's a 50-50 match in this. So you guys are going to be expending
right.
1.5. We're expending 1.5 if it's approved through ARPA. And I'm just wanting to ask the question, could you not cover that without the ARPA component if those dollars are needed elsewhere?
Sure. No, I understand the question. I will tell you, we have over $100 million now of capital infrastructure projects that need to be funded. So our need, especially on the infrastructure side, is always going to be great. We have, over from the failure of House Bill 19 to a host of other things, we are behind on on many of our infrastructure projects, significantly behind just because of weather and other things. So would it be funded otherwise? I mean, at some point in time, perhaps.
Okay.
But, this is a great opportunity, I think, to take care of a significant infrastructure need, and to your point, providing commission funds to do that as well.
Yeah. Okay. I just needed to ask the question
Sure.
because it's a small amount. I mean, $1.5 million is a good amount of money, but in the scope of things, I mean, you guys aren't benefiting a whole lot through ARPA, but on an issue that occurred back in 2016, it's now 2022.
We have a
small
long
amount.
list of infrastructure
Yes.
projects,
All right, thank you.
Representative,
Thank you,
long
Mr. Chair.
list.
Okay, seeing no further questions, I think maybe perhaps we've set a new record with the speed with which we've moved through an entire department's budget request. So thank you for
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you for helping us with our timeline here today, getting caught up on scheduling. Thanks for being here with us today. I suspect we will have some questions at a later time from the committee, and we appreciate any follow-up feedback on those questions. So thank you all.
Thank you, sir.
All right. Okay, folks, with that, we are done for the day in committee, and we are not noticed up at this time for any other subsequent hearings, but we do have more work to do, as you all know, so we will be looking to do that soon. So with that, we are adjourned. Thank you.